Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, I would like to thank IIIT for this gathering and for the support we have been showered with this week and personally throughout my research as well. And we start with a more humble approach. And I quote from the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, قالوا سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. All knowledge, whatever we have, is a trust, is a gift from God. Without Him, we would not be able to acquire this knowledge. My project is a twofold. I would like to make the case for the reform of Islamic chaplaincy and to make the call for the adoption of a practical methodology for the incorporation of Maqasid al-Shari'ah to reach a workable framework for the ethics of care for Muslim patients in the hospitals. It's an interdisciplinary methodology that will be the thesis of my PhD, and I would humbly ask your help to give me the feedback, as based on the presentations that we had this week, whether be it the legal theory or the ethical theory, it will be very hard to pinpoint which direction to go to produce a universal methodology that will work for Muslims wherever they are. I was prompted to pay attention to this based on the publications that are available outside. In October of last year, there was a significant research compiled in a book called Understanding Islamic Chaplaincy. It was published in England by Sophie Gilliatt-Ray, who underscored the shortage, first of all, of published material about Islamic chaplaincy. Then she made a bold claim that there is no formal theory of pastoral care in Islam, which is, the first time I read this, I was enraged. What do you mean by that? But looking and through the application as a chaplain myself, I found out that yes, there is no formal theory. There are several scattered attempts to provide spiritual care, but it's not following a methodology. And I would like to share with you some of my findings for the 2012 research that was titled The Barriers to Spiritual Care. I took a backward approach. Most research is being done on how to take care of Muslim patients. My research was why Muslim patients are not receiving the care they deserve. So in this, I unearthed a number of intrinsic and extrinsic barriers that today Muslim patients in any hospital in the US are facing with. Some of them are during the admission process, some of them during hospitalization, and what happens immediately after. So there is a lack of knowledge among the Muslim community of the concept of spiritual care. The lack of knowledge about the description of what a chaplain is, what is the scope of services, what are the needs of the patient himself or herself, how to seek and where to seek support from, and communication problems with those who are offering the service. There are extrinsic barriers, institutional barriers within the hospitals, including the identification of Muslim patients. Who are the Muslim patients? How do we go about identifying them? About the cultural and religious sensitivity, the cultural competency, the culture of Muslims. Is the hospital really equipped today? Is the treatment team with all of its members ready to take care of Muslim patients? And what are the methods of communication between the treatment team, primarily the chaplains in the hospital, and with the Muslim leaders outside of the hospital? it became evident that the American Muslim community has a shortage of trained Muslim chaplains who are available to provide the service from within the institutions. The overwhelming majority of our imams lack the training of how to offer spiritual care the way it's conducted within the context of American hospitals. We don't have the formal training, with the exception of those who are from the African American Muslim community, receive some training in chaplaincy. Once hospitalized, I did a research where I collected 400 samples from respondents. The patients claimed, those who were hospitalized within the past 5 years, 45% of them, they were not visited by a chaplain. While 75% of them don't know what a chaplain is. They might be visited, but they don't know who visited with them. Communication between patients and imam were at its lowest. 94% of Muslim patients, while hospitalized, will not call on an imam to visit with them in the hospital. And my brothers and sisters from the Indian Pakistani community topped the list with 94%. Followed by the African American indigenous community of 93% and Arabs at 82%. Will not call on an imam to visit with them while hospitalized. So that tells us about what are the beliefs, behaviors, and attitudes of the Muslim community of patients while being hospitalized, and how is that going to be relevant to tie it to the theme of this conference here. Upon admission, the Joint Commission that basically accredits hospitals left it up to the hospital to decide how to provide spiritual care to their patients. And it became voluntarily up to the hospital, with the exception of one case, end-of-life cases. End-of-life care is mandatory to provide. So once a patient is being admitted, there are two modes of admission, emergency and walk-in. When those who are in the walk-in scheduled admissions, the survey revealed that 45% were not asked about their faith while they are being admitted. The admission staff will collect information about history and physical insurance, people to contact, and they will ask, what is your religious preference? 45% claimed that they were not asked. Among those who were asked, 20% of the Muslim community withheld its religious preference. Went into categories such as no religious preference, unknown, other, declined to state. So when I, a chaplain, will every single day receive the list of Muslim patients, for example, at Stanford Hospital where I operate, I will get about 5 to 6 to 7 cases every single day. It's about 1% of the Muslim community, which is a true representation of Muslim community in general. However, when I dig through the other lists, call it profiling, intentional profiling, my list will swell by 300%. Why I'm doing that? To correct the census of the hospital, so the hospital will be able to provide a much better care for the customers. So it is endorsed by my department. For all that background, I call for the reform of Islamic chaplaincy. And the reform starts from the gatekeepers of the Islamic chaplaincy, who are the chaplains, who are providing the work, the care for Muslim patients. And the approach I would like to adopt is the Tawheedic approach, which is, let's go back to the basics and look and regard work as ibadah, work as an act of worship. So for me as a chaplain, when I look at work as an act of worship, everything becomes in place to provide, while receiving the benefit that this is a job, I'm being compensated for, and there is education, yet at the basic part, it's what is called da'wah bil-hal. It's a strive, individual strive. So Islamic chaplaincy is at its core a human-divine relationship. So since we're calling to refine the providers, it is an intentional approach to refine the chaplains so they will be able to provide an individual-centered, patient-centered care. The refine of the individual go through the stages that we have been given, prescribed. The first one is affirming our humanity, as the Quran mentioned. We have created you from a single pair of males and females, so you get to know one another. So it's our humanity. Based on it, my services is for the entire humanity. So I serve everyone without any distinction. The second stage, build the identity for the Muslim chaplain, which is the identity of Islam. We begin with affirming the faith, and based on it, I take that as providing same faith services to Muslim patients. So I can provide services to the entire humanity, Muslim and non-Muslim, and I can provide same faith services to Muslim patients. The third one is to refine the soul more, to reach the level of Iman. When, for me as a chaplain, look at the interest of others before I look for my own interests. And to be there for them, for the sake of being there for them, not for the sake of any gratification, and the final stage of reaching ihsan. Ihsan is what we heard of the hadith, تَخَلَّقُوا بِأَخْلَاقِ اللَّهِ, to embody, personal embodiment of the characters, attributes of God, and the emulation of the Prophet ﷺ. So in this case, it is ihya, reforming, revival, not reform, a revival of the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Islamic chaplaincy is a revival of the sunnah anchored in benefits. Because it has been said in the hadith, أَحَبُّ النَّاسِ إِلَى اللَّهِ أَنْفَعُهُمْ. Those who are the most beloved to God, those who bring the most benefit. So it is benefit-based, maslahah-based, to bring benefit to the individual as personal refinement and to others as well. So we have been anchoring that as maslahah-based. So we will fulfill and follow the footsteps of the Prophet of being an agent of compassion, rahmah, al-alameen, and to offer guidance or huda. So people will reach success in this life and salvation in the hereafter. And we will be offering the tools for how Islamic chaplaincy will achieve that. When we look at the reform, we have to engage other disciplines. That's why it's an interdisciplinary project. We look at, for example, in a Western context, the 4 principles of biomedical ethics that provide an opportunity for Muslim scholars to engage other scholars on what it means to have justice as one of the 4 principles. Are we talking about the same justice? What does it mean to say beneficence? Is that the same as benefit or maslahah? What does it mean to say non-maleficence? Is that the same as no harm in Islam? And what does it mean to have autonomy? Autonomy is being defined as personal wishes and desires. Well, we need to build on that and to include other concepts of the human-divine relationship from the Quran vis-a-vis concepts like freedom, human agency, responsibility of the individual, intentions, obligations, and consequences are all built in with the concept of autonomy. Once that is being reflected upon, so it's intentional reflective practice. I will not go too deep in describing what Maqasid is for this scholarly audience, but I look at what Imam al-Juwayni classified, the three areas of daruriyat, essentials, complementaries, hajiyat, and desirable, tahsiniyat, and limit the scope of the work on the daruriyat for the Islamic chaplaincy. As part of the interdisciplinary treatment team, using that approach of Maqasid, the physician work will become preservation of the life of the patient, and the chaplain scope of work primarily will become preservation of religion, hifz al-din. In certain very small percentage, when we cross, as a chaplain, will cross the boundary from preservation of religion into preservation of life, in certain cases when we discuss removal of a patient from life support, for example. That crossing from one area into another and still offer the perspective. The legal maxims, Qawaid al-Shari'ah, will offer a framework, dawabit, for my work. Looking at the tools, and I put on the screen, if you just take a glimpse, to look at a feeling wheel that I use for the purpose of conducting a spiritual assessment. It has some categories that, based on it, I ask questions with the right intention. Applying the legal maxims, I would be able to ask the question, my intention is right, and also make sure that I'm not harming the individual with the question that I'm asking. So the chaplain will be mindful of what they say, and more important, what the impact of what you do on the individuals. Since it's a benefit-based, the other aspect of the work is removal of harm, darar. So if we are not about to bring benefits, we are concerned with the other aspect of removal of harm. Many ask me, since you are anchoring that in Maqasid, you are doing da'wah bil-hal, why don't you da'wah to everybody in the hospital? Why don't you invite non-Muslims to faith, since you are concerned with faith? That is one question that I've been asked in every Muslim country that I visit. Since you are visiting non-Muslim patients, why don't you follow the footsteps of the Prophet ﷺ, who visited a patient, happened to be Jewish, and invited him to faith? And the father of that patient said, obey Abu Qasim. Yes. I said, well, considering the law of the land where we are in today, we have to look at it from a different perspective. It's still incorporating the aspect of maslahah and what the harm that is going to bring. Proselytization in the hospital is prohibited. So an act that will bring about goodness and salvation will result into removal or termination of access of the chaplain from the patients. If the Muslim chaplain is being terminated for fulfilling or following a prophetic tradition, we are denying Muslim patients of the ability to receive support that they needed, and that's where the harm is. So we refrain from fulfilling a sunnah that is recommended. The literature review that I encounter, most of the literature review starts with the 5 pillars of Islam. That is being a theme of, in order to take care of Muslim patients, you need to know the belief of the Muslims, and we start with the 5 pillars. Well, the 5 pillars are important yet irrelevant to the care of Muslim patients. None of our patients are fasting, sometimes too sick to fast. None would be offering zakah, and so on and so forth. So the visit to Muslim patients needs to be defined. What we're talking about when we say the two terms, iyada and ziyara, have been used interchangeably. We do ziyarat al-marid, or are we doing iyadat al-marid? And I would say we're doing عيادة المريض, not زيارة المريض, because زيارة is for the healthy, not for the sick. For the hadith of Prophet ﷺ, عودوا المريض حتى يبرأ. عودوا from the verb عادة means to return. So return, keep visiting until the patient is being relieved or from the sickness. There are many benefits to the visit. Some are worldly and some are heavenly. Imam al-Bukhari classified عيادة المريض as sunnah mu'akkada. And that is in line with the command using the verb عودوا. The Prophet ﷺ used the imperative form of عودوا, and also it is, if it's not done, it will be a blameworthy act. As the Hadith al-Qudusi, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask, I was sick and you were not there. So it was a blame kind of background. So it is a sunnah mu'akkada. The legal maxim of intention will refine the individual, the person who's providing the service, and also will become a place where we examine the consequences when someone asks for a service as well. So when someone say, I have a lot of pain, I need more morphine, for example, we look at the intention behind it in biomedical ethics, and we say, are we giving the person morphine to alleviate pain? Or some might say, well, there is some aspect that this kind of medication and some medication will actually take some impact on the health of the individual and might expire later on. So then we have to navigate between these two. In end-of-life cases, the work that we do in terms of ta'budiyat, ibadat, will help bring about what are the benefits. Since we're about halfway, I want to show a video to show why this is a human-divine relationship and that is personal. This video is a silent video that will make the case for why it should be a personal endeavor that will be, ought to be refined. Those are the Muslim patients. We established that 10% of what we deal with is ibadat, and 90% or 9% of the overwhelming majority of aspects of our faith is mu'amalat. How would you deal with the community? What is there in our literature that can be relevant and applicable from legal theories, from ethical theories, to bring about compassion, mercy, fulfill the mission of the Prophet ﷺ, anchor people in a relationship directly with God, talk about what is available to help them, support, for no reason except ابتغاء مرضات الله, seek the pleasure of Allah. So when that patient who is on their deathbed will receive the support he or she deserves, so they can meet with their Lord with a qalb salim, with a sound heart. It is a pillar of حقوق العباد, the rights of the people, to be fulfilled by the entire community. That's why I'm seeking help to help me. Where would I begin? What disciplines should we engage? Is it to be, will the theory of Maqasid be the right theory to begin? Knowing that every single case that you saw today, there is a legal maxim that will apply to them and they will help them. It's not about just going to visit the patient and offering a supplication, dua. It's about engaging intimately. When we say engaging intimately, we have steps. How we're going to reach the core of the patients right down to their heart, the organ that is the one that will make us blind or see the light and guidance. Are we going to just to keep it public, extend the greetings of Salaam Alaikum and end it and just go in and have a social talk? Are we going to go more personal? Be there for them, intimate relationship for nothing for the sake, except for the sake of empowerment of our community. The ethics is a pillar of this methodology. Al-Ahkam al-Shari'ah, or law, is a pillar. History is another pillar. Since the claim was made that Islamic Chaplaincy, we don't have a formal theory, we have examples of it. Sayyida Khadija radiallahu anha is the first chaplain in Muslim history. You all know the story of the revelation, the first revelation of the Prophet, that when he received, he became overwhelmed. Became overwhelmed to the point that did not know what was happening with him. And went to the person that he's trusted the most. And that person, his wife, immediately listened without judgment. Listen to the story, what he's saying. Was unable to provide the help that he needed outside of the personal support. Took him to someone who's a professional, happened to be her cousin, Waraqa ibn Nawfal, who interpreted that experience as a sign of prophethood. That act is called facilitation in Islamic chaplaincy. To facilitate support to someone else. We have a long history. The Prophet ﷺ passing by the Sahaba as they were tortured and invoking sabr, patience. We need to reform that prophetic tradition to understand what did he say beyond sabr and ala yasir? What were his non-verbal non-verbal communication? Did he weep? Did he make a dua to say, God, I don't have the means? Those are all a wealth of information that we have within our community. To recap, Islamic ethics is a pillar that we need to engage to bring about benefit to the community, to incorporate Maqasid, to incorporate the Aqidah, or the core of faith, and to bring about worship, aspects of fiqh al-marid, the jurisprudence of the sick, to bring about license, al-Maqasid al-Shari'ah, for them to make it easy on the patient. An overwhelming majority of Muslim patients today do not pray inside the hospital. Do not pray. We have part of the ta'abudiyat, and I will finish with that. Engage on aspect of sabr. Offer the patients the tools for munajah, contemplation, and communication with God. Dhikr, dua, seeking the nearness of God with a promise. God is there. Ud'uni astajib lakum. Invoke on me, I'm there, I'm very near. And keep the hope. Once again, thank you, Triple IT, for this opportunity. And may Allah bless us all as we strive in this path. Wassalamu alaikum.